Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, my friends, I know that the topic that you see in the title and that I'm about to expound upon is actually quite trite in our common discourse, and I talk about it quite a bit on this channel, but I would be remiss if I did not talk about such a unfortunately ubiquitous, simply meaning pervasive force in American politics that is race. There is an entire school of thought that is formulated on the basis of adherence to a racially based ideology. There are entire philosophies that are formulated on the basis of adherence to a racially based ideology. There are entire movements now in the public consciousness that are formulated on the basis of a racially based ideology. And we should probably understand racially based racial stuff, all that is a euphemism. A very sly euphemism for the death of the individual. All that is a very sly euphemism to the death of nuance. And I'm going to talk about that today in this video. So, I don't think, my friends, I have been told by a lot of people that Mr. Watson, you're black, and that defines you, or that's going to present a certain set of issues for you. I remember a teacher of mine in high school once told me, look, Christian, I won't debate this point with you, but the way you and I have to live, he was black as well, the way you and I have to live, that is different from those white kids up there. And I said, I respectfully disagree, sir. And he said, when you grow up, you'll understand. Well, I've grown up. As the Beach Boys say, when I grew up to be a man, then they talk about a bunch of questions. I grew up, I think I'm a man now, and I still disagree, But that is the perception which captures the minds of so many individuals in the United States and abroad, across the Western world especially. But what if I told you, my friends, that you didn't have to be bound to the sins of the past? You didn't have to be bound to these ideologies that say that you, by virtue of something you have no control over, are roped into a bunch of stuff that may or may not happen to you in the course of your life simply because of how you look. What if I told you, my friends, that race itself was nothing more than a single way of viewing the world that you could choose or drop voluntarily without much effort? What if I told you that race itself is a choice? Would you believe me? Now, there are a lot of questions, I'm sure, that are coursing through your mind right now. Christian, how can race be a choice? Isn't race, an endemic to our skin color and everything? No. So let's understand what race actually is. Race, my friends, is a general idea that defines a particular part of who we are. We call these general ideas in philosophy abstractions. So they define our immutable characteristics, our skin color, and things that are associated with it, to give it sort of form in the social world. So all race does is assign a social definition to things that exist biologically. It's when the social sphere merges with the sort of physiological sphere of our existence. Because, my friends, there are many different spheres of existence. It is a crucial mistake to assume that there's only one sphere of existence, because guess what? That's what race does. Ooh, you didn't know that, did you? That's what race does. Race assumes that there is a single sphere of existence that exists, if you follow modern-day race ideology, within a certain idea of power, so a certain structure of power, and your relation in that structure of power is precisely what will determine your fate in everyday life. So they're taking a broad idea, which we give meaning, which we use to define things that are beyond that idea, beyond the scope of race, and then they use that broad idea to make definite conclusions. But my friends, even though this broad idea has defined legions of sociological data and cultural perceptions, it is an abstraction. Race is an abstraction. And since race is an abstraction, it doesn't necessarily tell you anything useful about yourself. Race doesn't tell you anything useful about who you are, not as a human being, or even as someone in a social space. It tells you how someone a long time ago, or how a sociologist views who you are in relation to a general idea. That's it. And how can we live life, our lives, on the basis of a general idea and not on the basis of the particularities of our existence? There are three things which form out the idea of race: the will, your ability, your willingness to want to go along with race. Information informs your will, right? An engine is inside of a car, but the framework of the car informs the engine, right? You cannot have a car with just an engine. You have to have other parts, i.e. the framework. So the information is the framework of your will that you use to go ahead and make determinations about race, and the general attitudes, which are the culmination of wills that are captured and bound by the delusion of race. That is the trifecta of doom, which is throwing so many people into a rut these days over race. So I like to think about this metaphorically, though. You have a city on this side, and you have a forest on this side. Now, my friends, forests have a lot of different parts to them. Forests are a little bit more dynamic than cities. They have not been touched by the infrastructure of mankind. Typically, forests are typically simply the natural state of things, whereas cities are manifestations of the consciousness, of the brilliant consciousnesses of mankind, or whatever kind you want to call it. I call it mankind because I think man does not necessarily confer gender. It's simply a term. If you didn't know that, some people will be like, Christian, what about women? Yeah, women are included in that term. So a city, what does a city do? A city performs particular functions in an artificial environment. A forest is not artificial. It certainly performs certain functions, i.e. the circle of life, i.e. the certain ecosystems doing their thing, and certain cycles of the world, the water cycle. Yeah, there's all kind of things that happen in the forest. But the difference between the city and the forest, my friends, the city is nothing more than a construction. The forest is what actually exists. Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, said that we have to adhere to the logos of the world, the word. And the problem with so many ideas, Heraclitus noted in his ancient time, was that so many times people were bogged down with their own private understanding, and that private understanding rooted their ability to understand the world and just made it mediocre and incapacitated it. Race is the city that is incapacitating you from your next level. Race is the city that is giving you a single narrative, a bunch of functions that are in a single narrative about how the world exists. Race is the city that you need architects to interact with. And the architects of race are the critical race theorists, Ibram X, Kendi, Welsing, Crenshaw. These people have made this elaborate environment that we are sociologically and spiritually buying into, and it is parasitically sucking every single ounce of energy, every single ounce of fervor out of our bodies, but none of us want to go to the forest. If you go to the forest, my friends, you will realize that reality has a lot of different explanations than merely being about race. Your life, things that happen in your life, have a lot of many different explanations than simply being about the culmination of social power, or lack thereof. You have to use your will. Remember the paradigm I mentioned earlier, will, information, attitudes. You have to use your will to escape the general attitudes and seek information outside of the artificial environment that is indeed the city. When you do that, my friends, you will realize 100% that this world is much bigger than the term race, that your life is much grander than that human interactions are much more complex than what can be reduced to a single quality, that the world itself is much more complex than what can be reduced to a single quality, and that in the face of such grand unknown, in the face of such a brilliant tapestry of the unknown and the complex, race ideology cannot stand, and you can proclaim in epistemic humility and full righteousness that I am a divine individual, inscribed with purpose, inscribed with genius, on this earth, acting rationally, acting intelligently, and in my rationality and my intelligence, I will reject the term of race, and I will live my life through a dialectical, which means multi-processed, multi-step way of being, and I will not bind myself to the past. I will not bind myself to the land. I will not bind myself to a simple center idea of how the world is supposed to work. I'll go out, I'll go into the world. I'll go into the forest. I'll go by the river. I'll drink from the fresh river. I'll stop drinking that artificial water. I'll drink from the river. I'll hang out with the stags. I'll understand who they are. I'll understand what they want. I will understand just the sheer complexity of life. Take this metaphor, my friends, and use it to broaden your understanding. Because when you broaden your understanding, and when you understand that you are more than the color that is assigned to you, that you are more than a racial construction, that you are more than a sociological construction that has been crammed down your throat for so many years, when you realize you have a choice between this construction and freedom, conceptual freedom, then you will be back in power. And privilege, power and privilege, will no longer be the dynamic by which you need to weigh your life. You'll simply have to weigh your life by how fervent you are for knowledge and for the truth. Think on it. As always, my friends, I love you. And if you want to support my work, please, we're doing something very special here. Patreon.com/officialcwatson. Patreon.com/officialcwatson. I love you guys so much. Please comment, like, share, and tell me in the comments that you will no longer be bound to the past. Say, I am a free individual, and I will act in my freedom, in my conceptual freedom. Do that for me, please, in the comment section below. I love you guys, and please, as always, stay pensive. Bye-bye. Good night.